Welcome to Picture Mavericks, where every frame has a story. Today we are looking at a film that arrived in 2006 wearing the costume of a broad studio comedy and revealed itself, in its second half, to be something considerably more serious. Click was directed by Frank Karachi, written by Steve Coren and Mark O'Keefe, and it grossed over $237 million worldwide. It was marketed almost entirely on the strength of its comic premise. The audience that showed up for that premise received something they were not entirely prepared for. Understanding how Click engineers that tonal shift and why the shift works as well as it does tells us something precise about narrative structure and the specific responsibilities a film takes on when it asks its audience to follow it from one emotional register into another. The setup is efficient and clean. Michael Newman is an architect working toward a promotion that keeps being deferred. He is devoted to his family in the way that people are devoted to things they intend to get back to once the immediate pressure has passed. His wife Donna and his two children are present in his life without being central to it, because work has occupied the center for long enough that the arrangement has calcified into habit. Michael finds a universal remote control that turns out to control reality rather than just his television. He can pause, fast forward, rewind, and mute the world around him. The Bed Bath & Beyond employee who gives him the remote, played by Christopher Walken, warns him to use it carefully. Michael does not. This is a premise with obvious comic potential, and the film uses that potential efficiently in its first act. The comedy that comes from Michael pausing arguments, muting his dog, and skipping through unpleasant conversations is well constructed, and the film earns its laughs without straining for them. The tone in this section is light, and the audience is correctly positioned to enjoy the concept before the film begins to complicate it. The complication arrives through a feature the remote introduces called autopilot. When Michael fast-forwards through a difficult period at work, the remote learns his preferences and begins making decisions on his behalf. It starts skipping automatically through anything it has categorized as unpleasant or unproductive. Arguments with Donna. Illness. Family dinners that run long. This is the structural pivot the entire film is built around, and it is handled with considerable precision. The shift from Michael choosing to skip things to the remote skipping things for him reframes the premise entirely. What began as a fantasy of control becomes a portrait of its consequences. Michael is no longer using the remote. The remote is using the pattern of choices Michael has already made. The film is making a specific argument here. It is not arguing that ambition is wrong or that work is unimportant. It is arguing that the repeated small decision to defer presence in favor of productivity compounds over time into something irreversible. The remote does not create Michael's problem. It accelerates and makes visible a problem that was already developing through the ordinary logic of his daily choices. That is a more sophisticated observation than the premise initially suggests, and the script deserves credit for maintaining it consistently rather than allowing it to collapse into a simpler moral about work-life balance. The second half of the film moves Michael through decades of skip time in extended sequences that function less as comedy and more as consequence. He misses his father's last years. He misses his children growing up. He achieves the professional success he deferred everything for and arrives at it alone, estranged from Donna, physically deteriorated, and without the context that would have made the achievement meaningful. These sequences are where the film's craft becomes most visible. Karachi and his team make specific choices about how to present the material that keep it from tipping into melodrama while maintaining enough emotional weight to make the argument land. The aging makeup on Sandler is convincing enough to be unsettling without being distracting. The scenes between older Michael and his grown children carry a specific quality of distance that is more uncomfortable than overt conflict would have been. Adam Sandler's performance across these sequences is the element most frequently underestimated in discussions of the film. Comedy performers who attempt dramatic register are often criticized for the attempt regardless of the result. Sandler's work in Click's second half is genuinely effective. The character's grief is not performed loudly. It is carried in the physical diminishment of a man who has arrived somewhere he cannot leave and cannot explain to anyone around him how he got there. The film's most structurally significant scene occurs when Michael, old and ill, watches his son Ben's wedding from a distance. He is present at the event, but not part of it. The people around him have lives that were built without him in them. not through anyone's malice, but through the simple accumulation of his absence. The scene does not require dramatic confrontation to make its point. The distance is the point. This is the moment the film has been constructing toward since the autopilot feature was introduced. Everything before it has been preparation for the audience to understand what is being shown without being told explicitly. The script trusts the audience to read the scene correctly, and that trust is one of the reasons the film's emotional impact lands as broadly as it does. The resolution the film offers has been criticized as too convenient. Michael is returned to an earlier point in the timeline and given the opportunity to choose differently. The film ends with the implication that he will. That criticism has merit at a surface level. A film that has spent its second act demonstrating the irreversibility of accumulated absence does soften its argument by offering a reset. The structural logic of everything that precedes the ending suggests that second chances of this kind are precisely what real life does not provide. But there is another way to read the resolution. The film is not arguing that Michael gets a second chance. It is arguing that the audience does. Michael's journey through the consequences of his choices is not presented for his benefit. It is presented for the benefit of the people watching him. The reset is a device that closes the narrative cleanly while leaving the actual argument about presence, attention, and the cost of perpetual deferral intact and unresolved for anyone who takes it seriously. Whether that reading feels earned will depend on individual tolerance for the convention. What is clear is that the film does not arrive at its ending carelessly. The structural work that precedes it is deliberate enough that the resolution reads as a considered choice rather than a default. Click holds up as a film because its central argument is precise and its narrative structure serves that argument consistently from the setup through the second act consequences and into the resolution. The tonal shift from comedy to drama is not a betrayal of the premise. It is the fulfillment of it. A film about the cost of skipping through your own life cannot make that argument entirely in a comic register without undermining it. The fact that the film was marketed as something lighter than it is reflects a commercial calculation rather than a craft failure. The people who made Click understood what they were making. The audience that found it unexpectedly affecting understood it too. That gap between expectation and experience is precisely what gives the film its staying power. You arrive for the comedy. You leave with something else. And the something else was there from the beginning, built into the structure, waiting for the second act to make it visible. That was Picture Mavericks. If this breakdown gave you a new way into the film, subscribe and stay with us. Every video is built around one idea, that the best stories reward the people who look closer. We will see you in the next frame.